The wind at 20 below cut through Caleb Thornhill's wool coat like it wasn't there. He kicked the frozen gate 3 times before the hinges groaned open, rust flaking onto snow. The cattle pressed together in the pen, their breath steaming white against the gray February sky. Ice pellets struck the barn roof in sharp bursts, sounds like distant rifle fire. Then he heard it. A baby crying where no baby should be. Through the blizzard, whiteness came a small figure, dragging something blue through drifts that reached her waist. She fell once, twice. The third time she went down face first, but she pushed herself up, clutching the bundle tight against her chest. When she reached his fence, she collapsed. Caleb lifted her, a girl, maybe 8, one eye clouded and scarred, lips blue with cold. He unwrapped the baby, 6 months old, breathing shallow, dying. The girl's frost-cracked fingers were frozen to the blanket. She whispered 6 words. "Can you take him instead of me?" Caleb saw his stepson's eyes staring back at him. His grandchildren. He'd never met them. By dawn, an envelope arrived. Foreclosure notice. 90 days. $1,200. The fire crackled in the hearth, sparks climbing toward the chimney. Caleb heated milk on the iron stove, watching the surface shimmer as it warmed. His hands remembered the precise temperature. Hot enough to soothe, cool enough not to scald. He'd done this 30 years ago, for a son who'd died anyway. The baby took the milk, small pulls at first, then stronger. His color started coming back. Grace sat on the floor near the fire, wrapped in a blanket 3 sizes too big. She watched Caleb's every movement like she was memorizing instructions for later. When he set a bowl of stew in front of her, she broke the bread in half and tucked one piece in her pocket. "What are you saving that for?" Caleb asked. "Tomorrow, case there ain't more." Something twisted in his chest. "There'll be more, child. You don't need to hoard food here." She looked at him with her one clear eye. Didn't believe him. This was a girl who'd learned not to trust promises. The baby fell asleep in Caleb's arms. The weight of him felt like memory, like holding something he'd lost and thought he'd never hold again. Grace was still staring. "You're Grandpa Caleb, ain't you?" she whispered. He nodded. Couldn't speak past the tightness in his throat. "Papa said you didn't want us. Said you told him his family wasn't good enough." The words hit like fists. 8 years ago, Daniel had married a woman Caleb disapproved of, thought she was after the ranch. He'd said terrible things. "You marry her, you're no son of mine." Daniel had left. Caleb had never apologized. Now Daniel was dead, and his children were here, half frozen and starving. "Your papa was a good man," Caleb managed. "I was a prideful fool." "Papa died 6 months back," Grace said, her voice flat with practice. "Logging accident. Then Mama died, having Tommy. Mr. Cossett said he'd help us, but then he said, we gotta pay Papa's debts, or go to the county home." The name Cossett landed like a stone in cold water. "Mr. Cossett from the bank?" Grace nodded. Her whole body had gone tense. "He said I'm the one Papa owed money for. Said Tommy's just a baby, but I'm old enough to work off the debt. Said maybe a farm family would take me if I proved useful." Caleb's hands curled into fists. "You're not going anywhere, child. You're staying right here." "Are you sure?" Her voice was so small. "I only got one good eye, and I eat too much. Mr. Cossett said—" "I don't care what Mr. Cossett had said." Caleb knelt down so they were eye to eye. "You and Tommy are staying. That's final." For the first time since he'd found her, Grace almost smiled. Morning came cold and gray. The thaw was starting. He could hear water dripping from the eaves, but the ground was still frozen hard as iron. Caleb was making coffee when he heard a horse approaching. Pete, his ranch hand, rode up looking grim. He held out an envelope. "This came yesterday, boss. Didn't want to ride up in the storm." Caleb tore it open. The words swam in front of his eyes at first, then sharpened into focus. Notice of foreclosure. Outstanding mortgage lien. $12,200 due. April 30th, 1933. Failure to pay will result in public auction of property. His eyes caught on one line. Mortgage lien co-signed by Daniel Thornhill, deceased, dated November 15th, 1931. "Daniel never co-signed anything," Caleb said aloud. "Boy didn't have 2 nickels to rub together." Pete shifted in his saddle. "Heard Virgil Cossett's been buying up liens on dead men's property. Foreclosed 3 farms already this winter. Whole county's going under." The paper showed a notary stamp. Official seal. It looked legitimate. $1,200, Caleb said. The number felt impossible. He had 40 head of cattle, a barn full of hay, a truck that barely ran. In 1933, that made him rich compared to most. But cash? Cash was a dead man's dream. Pete glanced toward the house. Boss, are those kids inside? My grandchildren. Didn't know you had. Neither did I. Not till yesterday. Pete was quiet for a moment. Virgil Cossett's a hard man, boss. He don't forget, and he don't forgive. Neither do I. After Pete left, Caleb stood on his porch looking at the paper. The numbers blurred. 90 days. April 30th. He had 90 days to find $1,200 or lose everything. Inside, through the window, he could see Grace holding Tommy, singing something soft. The baby was laughing now, small, hiccuping sounds of joy. Grace saw him watching. She pressed her face against the glass. Then she saw the paper in his hand. Her whole expression changed. Terror flooded her face. "That's Mr. Cossett's bank," she whispered through the window. The bank lobby smelled of floor wax and desperation. Farmers lined the walls, hats in hands, waiting to beg for extensions they wouldn't get. Caleb shouldered through them toward the back office where Virgil Cossett held court. The door was open. Virgil sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than most men made in a year. His suit was pressed, hair slicked back with pomade. He looked up when Caleb entered and smiled like they were old friends. "Mr. Thornhill, I was wondering when you'd come." Caleb dropped the foreclosure notice on the desk. "This says my stepson co-signed a lien. Daniel's been dead 6 months." "I'm aware." Virgil opened a leather folder and pulled out a document. The lien was executed November 15th, 1931, 18 months ago, well before Mr. Daniel Thornhill's unfortunate passing. He spread the paper across the desk. There was Daniel's name, signed in dark ink at the bottom, a notary stamp beside it. Caleb leaned close. Something about the signature looked wrong, but he couldn't place it. And there was a smell, wet ink, fresh, like the document had just been written. "Daniel didn't own any part of my ranch," Caleb said. "Couldn't co-sign what he didn't own. He was your son, Mr. Thornhill. Inheritance claim. Quite legal. Stepson. Married my wife when the boy was 12. My father's will says blood heirs only." Virgil's smile didn't waver. "Do you have proof of that? A will, filed at the courthouse?" Caleb hesitated. "It's on record. From 1891. 42 years ago." Virgil tapped the lien. "Records from then are spotty at best. There was a fire in 97, destroyed much of the archive. But this is fresh, notarized, legal. You owe $1,200, Mr. Thornhill. Pay it by April 30th, or the ranch goes to auction." A teller knocked on the doorframe. "Mr. Cossett, there's a line." "Tell them to wait." Virgil's voice went cold. When the teller left, he turned back to Caleb. "I'm a reasonable man. I'll make you an offer. Sell me the ranch today for $800, clean transaction. You walk away with cash, and those children get a fresh start somewhere else." "Not interested." "Think about it, Caleb. You're 64 years old, alone. You really want to spend your last years raising someone else's children while fighting a legal battle you can't win?" Caleb's hands curled into fists on the desk edge. "They're not someone else's children. They're mine." "Legally? I doubt that." Virgil leaned back in his chair. "But we'll let the courts decide. Speaking of which, Judge Cossett handles all foreclosure cases in this county. My brother-in-law. Good man. Very fair. Very thorough." The floor dropped out from under Caleb's feet. "Your brother-in-law. Family's important, don't you think?" Virgil's smile was a knife. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other appointments." Caleb stood on the courthouse steps, the cold mud of the street soaking through his boots. Through the window, he could see Virgil and another man, older, with a judge's stern face, laughing together over cigars. Judge Harlan Cossett. The legal system wasn't just rigged, it was owned. He rode home in silence. The landscape was shifting, ice giving way to mud, the first signs of thaw everywhere. But the ground was still frozen underneath, still winter, despite what the surface showed. Grace was waiting on the porch, Tommy in her arms. "Did you fix it, Grandpa?" He couldn't lie to her. "Not yet." "Are we going to have to leave?" "No, child, we're staying. I don't know how yet, but we're staying." That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with the foreclosure notice spread in front of him, studying Daniel's signature by lamplight. Something was wrong with it, the slant, the pressure, something. Grace appeared in the doorway, barefoot in her too big nightgown. "Can't sleep either?" Caleb asked. She came to the table and looked at the paper. Her small finger traced the signature. "That don't look like Papa's writing." "What do you mean?" "Papa was left-handed. Like you, his writing always curled left, all cramped up, but this, she tilted her head. This slants right, like whoever wrote it was right-handed. Caleb stared at the signature, then at Grace, then back at the paper. She was right. The stroke order, the slant, it was all wrong for a left-handed writer. He'd watched Daniel write 1,000 times when the boy was young, always that awkward left-handed curl, always smudging the ink with the side of his hand. The signature was clean, right-slanted, confident. Grace, Caleb said slowly, you just caught something a whole bank full of lawyers missed. Is that good? It's proof. Now we just have to figure out how to use it. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance. The sound carried across the frozen fields, lonely, wild, dangerous. Inside, Tommy started crying. Grace went to him automatically, picking him up, singing soft. Caleb looked at the signature again, at the notary stamp beside it, at the date, November 15th, 1931. He had 90 days to prove Virgil Cossette had forged a dead man's name, and the only judge in the county was Virgil's brother-in-law. The mud was everywhere now. March had arrived wet and cold, turning the roads into rivers of brown slush. Caleb stood in his cattle pen, watching a neighboring rancher inspect his herd with the eyes of a vulture. I can give you 400 for 40 head, the man said. That's fair, given the times. It wasn't fair. In better years, those cattle would fetch 600 easy. But these weren't better years. This was 1933, and cash was rarer than honesty. Done. They shook hands. The rancher's grip was firm, but his eyes wouldn't meet Caleb's. Heard you got troubles, Caleb. Doing you a favor? Taking these off your hands? The words stung worse than the low price. Grace watched from the porch. Tommy on her hip. She saw her grandfather sell half his herd for less than it was worth, saw him pocket the money with his jaw tight. She was learning what powerlessness looked like. After the rancher's truck rumbled away, trailing diesel exhaust that hung in the damp air, Grace went exploring in the barn. The smell of old-in manure was thick, released by the thaw. She found things tucked in corners, rusted tools, broken harness, a wooden crate full of horseshoes, and in the back, under a canvas tarp, she found an iron bar with a wooden handle. When she pulled off the tarp, dust rose in a cloud that made her sneeze. The iron had letters carved into its face, CT 1891. She carried it to Caleb. What's this mean? He took it from her, wiped the dust away with his thumb. For a moment, he just stood there, holding it like it weighed nothing and everything at once. That's my brand, child. My father's before me. Proves what's mine. Can we brand Tommy? Grace asked. So everybody knows he's ours? Despite everything, Caleb almost smiled. That's not quite how it works, but you're thinking right. Sunday came cold and bright. The church bells rang across the valley, calling people to service and the potluck after. Caleb hadn't attended in 8 years, but today he hitched up the wagon and loaded Grace and Tommy into it. Are we going to town, Grandpa? We are? Will people be nice to us? He didn't answer that. Couldn't promise what he didn't know. The church steps were smooth stone, worn down by decades of boots. Lilac bushes grew wild on either side, blooming early in the fall spring, their scent sweet and heavy in the air. People gathered in clusters, talking in low voices that stopped when Caleb's wagon arrived. He climbed down, helped Grace down, took Tommy from her arms, walked right up those steps like he had every right to be there. Half the congregation turned their backs. The other half offered tight, uncomfortable smiles. Caleb found a spot at one of the long tables where food was spread. Fried chicken, fresh bread, pies that steamed in the cool air. He set Tommy on his lap and handed Grace a plate. The whispers started immediately. He could hear them even though they thought they were being quiet. Abandoned his boy for 8 years. Now he wants sympathy. Those poor children. Grace heard them too. Her hand tightened on her fork. Then a woman sat down across from them. Ida Mae Frost, 58, gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, hands marked with ink stains from her work at the courthouse. She set down a plate loaded with extra chicken. Figured you might be hungry, she said to Grace. Growing girl needs her strength. The whispers got louder. Ida Mae Frost had just chosen a side, and everyone saw it. Other people noticed too. Some moved away, some moved closer. Ida ate in silence for a few minutes, then leaned toward Caleb. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. That lean Virgil's holding over you. It's got peculiarities. What kind? Not here. Her eyes flicked toward the congregation. Come to the courthouse Tuesday night, side door, 8 o'clock, and bring the girl. She looked at Grace. Smart children notice things grown-ups miss. Grace's ears had perked up. She understood she was being included in something important. "Why are you helping me?" Caleb asked. Ida's jaw tightened. "Because I've watched Virgil Cossette steal 3 farms this winter using the same trick, and because my sister lost her place the same way, dead husband, forged papers, children scattered to orphanages, I didn't help her. I'm helping you." She stood up, took her plate, and walked away before anyone could see them talking too long. The minister approached a few minutes later, Reverend Murphy, 65, with the soft hands of a man who'd never worked land. "Caleb, it's good to see you back in God's house." "Reverend, I heard about your situation with Virgil Cossett." The minister's voice was gentle, practiced. "Sometimes God tests us by asking us to surrender what we hold too tightly. Perhaps this is his way of teaching you about pride." Caleb set down his coffee. "God sent me 2 children in a blizzard, Reverend. I don't think he wants me to surrender them to a thief." "Virgil Cossette is a generous donor to this church. Then maybe this church needs to pray harder about where its money comes from." The minister's face went red. He walked away without another word. Grace looked up at Caleb. "Did we just make everything worse?" "Maybe, but we made it honestly." On the ride home, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. The light was thin and cold, but it was there. Grace fell asleep against Caleb's shoulder, Tommy in her lap. Tuesday night, courthouse basement, 8 o'clock. Hope was a dangerous thing, but it was better than nothing. The kitchen table was covered with papers. Lamplight flickered across Daniel's signature. That wrong, right-slanted signature that didn't match the left-handed boy Caleb had raised. Grace sat beside him, coloring with chalk on a scrap of wood. Tommy slept in his basket by the fire, his breathing soft and even. Rain tapped against the windows, the first real spring rain, washing away the last of the snow. Caleb traced the signature with his pencil, trying to understand what his eyes knew, but his mind couldn't prove. The stroke order was wrong. A left-handed writer started from a different angle, pulled the pen across the page differently. Grace stopped coloring mid-stroke. She was staring at the lean. "What is it, child?" "That really don't look like Papa's writing." She tilted her head. "Papa's hand always curled funny when he wrote, like yours does when you pour coffee in the morning, all cramped up on the left side." Caleb froze. He looked at his own hand, remembering the 1,000 mornings he'd poured coffee left-handed, the awkward angle of it. Then he looked at Daniel's signature again. The letters flowed smooth and confident, right to left. No cramping, no smudging, clean as printed text. A right-handed man had written this. "Grace," Caleb said slowly, "you just caught what a whole courthouse full of lawyers would have missed." "Is that good?" "It means Virgil Cossett is a forger. Now we just have to prove it." Grace smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Then her face changed. "Grandpa, Tommy sounds funny." Caleb's blood went cold. He crossed to the basket in 3 steps. Tommy's breathing wasn't soft anymore. It was labored, rattling, wet. His forehead burned under Caleb's palm. "No," Caleb whispered. "Not again." Grace was beside him instantly. "What's wrong with him?" "Pneumonia. Same thing that killed my son 30 years ago." He scooped Tommy up, grabbed his coat. "Watch the fire. Keep the door locked. I'm writing for Doc Harrison." "Grandpa, it's dark. I know what it is." He was already out the door. The 15 miles to Doc Harrison's place felt like 100. The rain turned to sleet halfway there, then back to rain. Caleb's horse stumbled twice in the dark, but he pushed her on. The sound of Tommy's breathing from that basket wouldn't leave his head. That wet, desperate rattle. He'd heard it before. In another child, another lifetime. Doc Harrison answered the door in his nightshirt, took one look at Caleb's face, and grabbed his bag. They rode back in silence. The sky was starting to lighten. Gray dawn, cold and merciless, by the time they reached the ranch. Grace had kept the fire going. Tommy was worse. His lips had a blue tinge now, his breathing so shallow you had to watch close to see his chest move. Doc Harrison worked quickly, listened to the baby's chest, felt his forehead, checked his color. Finally, he straightened. "Pneumonia? Bad. He needs medicine. I've got some, but Caleb..." "How much?" $50. The number hit like a fist. Caleb had just sold 40 head of cattle for $400. Minus 50 for medicine left him $350, against a $1,200 debt. "And the pharmacy's owned by Virgil's cousin," Doc Harrison added quietly. "He'll know you bought it within the hour." I don't care who knows. Caleb pulled the money from his pocket. Save him. Doc Harrison counted out the bills. I'll send word to the pharmacy soon as they open. Should have it by noon. In the meantime, keep him warm. Get fluids in him if you can. And Caleb, he paused at the door, I'll bill you later for the visit. Don't worry about it now. Add it to the pile, Caleb said. After Doc left, Grace climbed into Caleb's lap. She was shaking. Is Tommy going to die like Mama? No, child. I won't let that happen. Promise? He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But he'd learned not to make promises he couldn't keep. I'll do everything I can. That seemed to be enough. She laid her head against his chest and closed her eyes. Outside, the rain kept falling. Somewhere out there, Virgil Cossett was counting his money and plotting his next move. The next morning brought worse news. Caleb heard horses and looked out to see Virgil riding up with an official-looking man carrying surveyor's equipment. They didn't knock, just started walking his property line, planting stakes, measuring distances. Caleb grabbed his coat and met them at the north fence. What the hell are you doing on my land? Virgil smiled. He was always smiling. Just verifying property boundaries, Caleb. Nothing personal. This is Mr. Hendricks, county surveyor. The surveyor was a nervous man with ink-stained fingers. He wouldn't meet Caleb's eyes. Your deed says 320 acres, Virgil continued. But Mr. Hendricks here has found some discrepancies. What kind of discrepancies? Appears your father's original survey was optimistic. The north 40 acres? County land. Always has been. Caleb's hands curled into fists. That fence has been standing since 1891. You telling me it's been wrong for 42 years? Common error back then, the surveyor mumbled. Before proper equipment, this is theft. This is accuracy. Virgil gestured at the stakes. Your 320-acre ranch is actually 280, which affects the auction value considerably. Even if you somehow scrape together $1,200, Caleb, the land's worth less than you think. Insurance, you might say. The surveyor planted another stake. The sound of it driving into the mud was like a nail in a coffin. See you in court, Virgil said. Both courts, the foreclosure and the boundary dispute, should be an interesting spring for you. He rode off, the surveyor trailing behind like a whipped dog. Caleb stood there in the mud, watching them go. Behind him, through the window, he could see Grace trying to get Tommy to take milk. The baby wasn't drinking. $350 left, $1,200 owed, 90 days, no, 73 days now. A judge who was Virgil's brother-in-law, a property line that was suddenly 40 acres shorter, and a 6-month-old baby with pneumonia who might not live to see April. He'd fought through blizzards, fought through droughts, fought through the death of everyone he'd ever loved, but this felt different. This felt like losing. Grace appeared on the porch, Tommy wrapped in a blanket. She looked so small standing there, so fragile, but her voice carried across the yard, clear and strong. Grandpa, I think Tommy's breathing better. The medicine's working. It was something. Not much, but something. Caleb walked back to the house. The mud sucked at his boots with every step trying to hold him down. But he kept moving, because sometimes that's all you can do. Keep moving, keep fighting, even when you're pretty sure you're going to lose. The rain had stopped. In the distance, a crow called out, harsh and lonely. Spring was coming, but winter wasn't done with him yet. Tuesday night came cold and quiet. Caleb left Tommy with a neighbor woman. The baby's fever had broken, his breathing easier, and rode to town with Grace beside him in the wagon. The courthouse loomed dark against the evening sky, most windows black. Only one light burned in the basement. Ida Mae Frost was waiting at the side door. Quick now, she whispered, ushering them inside. Night custodian makes his rounds at 9. The basement smelled of old paper and mildew. Dust hung thick in the air, visible in the lamplight. Ida led them through narrow aisles lined with filing cabinets and wooden crates stacked to the ceiling. The floor was stone, cold even through boot leather. She pulled out a leather-bound ledger and spread it on a scarred table. Original land grants, 1891. She opened to a marked page. Here, Thornhill Ranch, 320 acres granted to Josiah Thornhill and blood heirs in perpetuity. Grace leaned close, sounding out the words. Blood heirs only, she read slowly. That's right, child. Ida looked at Caleb. Daniel was your stepson, married your widow in 1918. He was 12. So he had no blood claim, couldn't legally co-sign a lien on property he had no right to inherit. She pulled out another document. And here's the peculiar part. Look at the filing ledger. She traced her finger down a column of dates. Virgil's lien claims to be dated November 15th, 1931, but it wasn't filed with the county until February 10th, 1933. Caleb stared at the numbers. 15 months later, after Daniel died. 6 months after Daniel died, Ida corrected. She pulled out one more paper. County death certificate. Daniel Thornhill, deceased June 12, 1932. The documents lay spread across the table like evidence at a trial. Grace touched the death certificate gently, tracing her father's name. "So Mr. Cossett wrote Papa's name after Papa was already dead?" she asked. "That's what I think. And there's one more thing." Ida pulled out a small registry book. "Notary stamps. Every notary in the county registers their seal. See this?" She pointed to the stamp on Virgil's lien. This stamp shows an expiration date of January 1932, but it wasn't issued until late November 1931. Caleb leaned closer. The stamp was clear, small numbers showing when it would expire. "I don't understand," he said. Grace's finger traced the numbers. "The stamp shows when it stops working, so if it stops working in January 1932, and the paper says it was signed in November 1931. She looked up. "The stamp would have just been made. It wouldn't show a future date yet." "Exactly." Ida's eyes were bright. "Whoever forged this used a stamp that didn't exist yet when the document claims to be signed. Virgil got sloppy, arrogant." The pieces fell into place. A signature by a right-handed forger pretending to be a left-handed dead man. A filing date 6 months after the supposed signer died. A notary stamp that revealed its own fraud through its dating. "This ends it," Caleb said. "We take this to Judge Cossett." "Judge Cossett is Virgil's brother-in-law." Ida's voice was gentle but firm. "You think he'll rule against family? Against the man who probably paid for his last election campaign? Then what do we do? You make it public." Ida gathered the documents carefully. "Judge Cossett cares about one thing more than his brother-in-law, keeping his seat. He's up for election next year. If enough people see this evidence, if enough townspeople witness the fraud, he can't rule for Virgil without losing everything." "How do I make it public?" "That's what you need to figure out." Ida looked at Grace. "And this one here, she's got good eyes. Caught the signature forgery. Maybe she'll catch something else we missed." Grace stood a little straighter at the praise. They heard footsteps above, heavy boots crossing the main floor. "Custodian," Ida hissed. "You need to go. Now." She hustled them to the side door, pressing a small package into Caleb's hands. "Copies. I made copies. The originals stay here, but you'll need these. And Caleb," she gripped his arm, "be careful. Virgil's dangerous when he's cornered." They slipped out into the night. The cold air hit like a slap after the dusty basement. Caleb helped Grace into the wagon, and they rode home in silence, the package of documents hidden under the seat. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Caleb spent the time thinking, planning. He had evidence now, proof of fraud that even a corrupt judge would have trouble ignoring if enough people saw it. But how do you force a whole town to witness truth? Grace found him in the barn one afternoon, staring at the old branding iron, CT 1891, that she'd discovered weeks ago. He was cleaning it, wire brushing away 40 years of rust and dust. "What are you doing, Grandpa?" "Thinking about proof." He held up the iron. "Paper can be forged, signatures can be faked, even notary stamps can be backdated if you're clever. But this," he touched the iron, "this is permanent, can't be changed, can't be erased." "How does that help us?" "I'm not sure yet, but I'm working on it." That evening, Eli Drummond rode up, 70 years old, back bent from a lifetime of railroad work, but his eyes were sharp and his handshake was iron. "Heard you got troubles with Virgil Cossett," he said without preamble. "News travels fast. Small town, smaller when a man like Virgil starts stealing land." Eli spat in the dirt. "I was there in 1891, Caleb. I witnessed your daddy's will, blood heirs only. He was specific about it. Didn't trust in-laws after his brother's widow tried claiming land. Virgil says there's no proof of that, says records were destroyed in the fire of 97. Records might be gone, but I ain't." Eli's jaw set. "I'll testify, in court or anywhere else you need me." "Eli, Virgil holds loans on half the county. He'll come after you." "Let him try. I'm 70 years old. Ain't got much left to lose except my word, and I'll be damned if I let that die before I do." Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Not quite hope, but close. There's something else, he said slowly. I'm thinking about having a branding ceremony, spring branding. Invite the whole town, let folks see the cattle, see the marks. Every calf born on this ranch for 40 years carries that CT brand. Eli's eyes lit up. Proof that can't be forged. Exactly. When? End of April, right before the auction date. Give me time to prepare, time to spread word. Caleb looked at the old man. You think people will come? To watch you brand cattle? Maybe not. But to watch you prove Virgil Cossette's a fraud in front of God and everybody? Eli grinned. Wouldn't miss it for the world. After Eli left, Grace came to stand beside Caleb on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the first real color they'd seen in months. Are we going to win, Grandpa? I don't know, child, but we're going to fight like hell. She slipped her small hand into his. They stood there together, watching the light fade, feeling spring settle into the valley like a promise. In the barn, the branding iron hung on its hook, waiting. April brought mud and gossip in equal measure. Caleb started hearing whispers everywhere he went. In the general store, at the feedlot, even at the blacksmith's where he took his plow blade to be sharpened. The whispers followed a pattern, started quiet, grew louder when they thought he couldn't hear. Unmarried man with a young girl. Awful convenient, those children showing up, probably after their inheritance himself. Not proper, old man raising a girl that age. The minister came by on a Thursday afternoon. Reverend Murphy climbed down from his buggy with the careful movements of a man delivering bad news. Caleb, might I have a word? They sat on the porch. Tommy was napping inside. Grace was in the garden, planting seeds in neat rows. She'd taken to gardening like she'd been born to it. I've been hearing concerns, the minister began, from members of the congregation about your arrangement here. What arrangement? A 64-year-old widower, a young girl. No woman in the house to provide proper supervision. Murphy's voice was gentle, but the words cut. I'm not saying anything improper is happening, but appearances matter, Caleb, and people talk. Caleb's hands gripped the porch rail. Those are my grandchildren. Estranged grandchildren, that you'd never met before February. Murphy sighed. I know your heart is good, but perhaps it would be better for everyone if the children were placed with a proper family. 2 parents, a mother figure for the girl. You mean let Virgil put them in the county home? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Caleb stood. Tell your congregation this. Those children stay here. Anyone with concerns can come talk to me directly. But they won't, because they're cowards who let Virgil Cossette pull their strings. Murphy's face flushed red. Virgil is a pillar of our church, a generous donor. Then maybe you need to pray harder about where that generosity comes from. The minister left without another word. His buggy wheels churned up mud as he drove away. Grace had heard everything. She stood in the garden, dirt on her hands, tears on her face. They think you're bad, Grandpa. I know, child. But you're not. You're the best person I ever knew. He couldn't speak past the tightness in his throat, just held out his arms, and she ran to him. 2 days later, a neighbor stopped by. Ben Yoder owned the farm 3 miles east, good man, 5 children. He stood in the yard twisting his hat in his hands. Caleb, I heard what you're planning, the branding ceremony. You heard right. I want to help, I do, but... Yoder's eyes dropped. Virgil holds my mortgage. $3,000. If I testify for you or even show up at your ranch that day, he'll call the note due. I can't risk it. I got 5 kids. I understand. Do you? Because I feel like a coward saying it. You're not a coward, Ben. You're a father protecting his children. I can't fault you for that. After Yoder left, 3 more neighbors came. Different reasons, same answer. Virgil had them all trapped. Mortgages, business loans, supply credit at the feed store. Every man in the county owed Virgil something. By sunset, Caleb was standing alone in his yard, watching the last neighbor's wagon disappear down the road. The isolation felt complete, total. Then he saw dust rising from the south road, a rider coming fast. It was Ida Mae Frost, riding astride like a man, her skirts hiked up and mud splattered. She reined in hard, breathing heavy. Caleb, I found something else. She pulled papers from her saddlebag. Her hands were shaking, not from cold, from excitement. I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about that notary stamp, so I went back through the registries. Look. She spread the papers on his porch rail. This is the notary commission log. Every notary has to renew every 2 years. See James Henderson? He notarized Virgil's lien, but Henderson's commission expired in January 1932. Caleb stared at the dates. So the lien claims to be notarized November 1931 by a man whose commission was about to expire, but look at the stamp. It shows a 1932 expiration date. She pointed to the tiny numbers on the stamp impression. That stamp could only show 1932 if it was issued after Henderson renewed his commission in February 1932. Grace had come out to listen. Her eyes were following the logic. So the stamp didn't exist when the paper says it was signed, she said slowly. Exactly. Ida's smile was fierce. Virgil used a stamp from 1932 to forge a document dated 1931. The stamp itself proves the fraud. It was beautiful, elegant, the kind of detail that could convince even skeptical minds because it was objective. Math and dates that couldn't be argued with. Will Judge Cosett accept this? Caleb asked. He'll have to, if enough people see it, if enough witnesses force his hand. Ida gathered the papers. I'm making more copies tonight. And Caleb, I heard about the neighbors refusing to help. Don't let it break you. There are still some of us who remember what courage looks like. After she left, Eli Drummond arrived with news of his own. Found your proof, he said, grinning. Remember you asked about the old herd, the original cattle from your daddy's time? What about them? Old Ironside. The bull you retired 5 years back. He's still alive, still in your far pasture, 25 years old. Ancient for a bull. So he was born in 1908, branded that same year with your father's iron, CT 1891. I helped brand him myself. Eli's eyes gleamed. Daniel wasn't born until 1910. How could Daniel co-own a bull that was branded 2 years before he was born? Caleb felt the pieces clicking into place. The branding iron, the old bull, the physical timeline that couldn't be forged or backdated. We need to bring him to the ceremony, Caleb said. Already planned on it. That bull's ornery as hell, but he's proof that walks on 4 legs. Can't argue with that. That evening, Caleb started posting notices around town. Handwritten, simple, nailed to every post and board that would hold them. Spring branding ceremony, Thornhill Ranch, April 27th, 10 a.m., all welcome, witness truth. He posted one on the church steps, one at the general store, one at the blacksmith's, one outside the bank itself. Virgil saw him hammering in the last nail at the feedlot. He rode over, his horse's hooves splashing mud. What game are you playing, Thornhill? No game. Just inviting folks to watch spring branding. It's tradition. You think a dog and pony show will change the law? Caleb looked up at him. Law's made of paper, Virgil. Brands are made of iron. We'll see which one lasts. For the first time, he saw something flicker in Virgil's eyes. Not quite fear, but close. Uncertainty. Virgil leaned down from his saddle. You're making a mistake, old man. Maybe, but it'll be my mistake, on my land, with my family. That's more than you'll ever have. Virgil rode away without another word. Grace had been watching from the wagon. Grandpa, what if nobody comes? Then we brand the cattle anyway, child. But they'll come. Folks might be scared, but they ain't blind. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of spring rain and fresh-turned earth. The notices fluttered on their posts, calling people to witness. 10 days until the ceremony. 63 days until the auction. Everything would be decided soon. The cemetery sat on a hillside overlooking the valley. Caleb hadn't been there since Daniel's funeral 6 months ago, hadn't been able to face the grave, or the guilt that came with it, but Grace had been asking. Can we visit Papa? Tell him we're okay now? So on a Sunday morning, with dew still heavy on the grass and robins singing in the cottonwoods, Caleb hitched the wagon and they rode up the hill. Daniel's grave was simple, a wooden marker with his name and dates carved deep. Someone, probably the church ladies, had planted wildflowers around it. They were just starting to bloom, small purple heads pushing through the wet earth. Grace had picked more wildflowers on the way. She laid them carefully at the base of the marker, arranging them just so. Caleb stood back, hat in his hands, words caught in his throat like fishhooks. Grace knelt in the grass, talking to her father in a quiet voice. Papa, we're living with Grandpa now. He's taking care of us real good. Tommy's getting big. He can almost walk. And I'm learning to garden. Grandpa says I got a gift for it. She paused, touching the letters of her father's name. We miss you, but we're okay. You don't got to worry about us no more. Caleb's chest felt like it was cracking open. He knelt beside the grave, his old knees protesting, and finally spoke. "Son." His voice broke on the word. "Daniel, I was wrong. Wrong to push you away. Wrong to let pride matter more than you. 8 years I stayed angry because I couldn't admit I'd made a mistake." The wind rustled through the grass. A crow called in the distance. "You raised a good girl. She's saving me more than I'm saving her. And I promise, I swear to you, I'll tell her about you. The good parts, the true parts. She'll know you loved her." Grace was crying now, quiet tears rolling down her cheeks. "Papa said you were stubborn but good," she whispered. "He said someday you'd come back. He was right." Something broke loose in Caleb's chest. Grief he'd been carrying for 8 years, maybe longer. He pulled Grace close, and they sat there together by the grave, holding each other while the sun climbed higher and warmed the earth. Behind a nearby headstone, hidden by a limestone angel, neither of them saw the small figure watching. A boy, maybe 10, who'd been visiting his grandmother's grave, who'd heard every word. By evening, half the town would know. Caleb Thornhill had wept at his son's grave, had apologized to a dead man, had shown the kind of vulnerability that men weren't supposed to show. 3 days before the branding ceremony, Caleb started preparing in earnest. He repaired the cattle pen, reinforced the fences, built up the fire pit where the branding irons would heat. Eli came to help, bringing his own iron from 1891, proof that the brand predated everything Virgil claimed. Grace worked beside them, stacking wood, organizing tools. Tommy toddled around the yard, getting into everything, laughing when he fell down in the mud. By the second day, wagons started appearing on the horizon. Not many, but some. Families Caleb barely knew, coming early, setting up camps on his property. Some brought food, some brought tools to help with the work. Most brought quiet determination, the kind that comes from watching injustice for too long and finally deciding to stand against it. But for every wagon that arrived, Caleb knew there were 10 more that stayed away. 10 families too afraid of Virgil's reach, too trapped by debt to risk speaking up. On the evening before the ceremony, Caleb stood on his porch counting campfires. He could see maybe 15, 50 people, if he was lucky. 60 at most. Was that enough? Enough to force a corrupt judge's hand? Enough to stop Virgil? He didn't know. Grace appeared beside him. She'd been quiet all day, sensing the weight he carried. "You scared, Grandpa?" "Terrified." The honesty seemed to comfort her. "Me too. But Papa used to say being scared just means you got something worth fighting for." "Your Papa was a smart man." They stood in silence, watching the fires burn. The smell of wood smoke drifted across the yard, mixing with the scent of spring grass and damp earth. "Grandpa, what happens if we lose tomorrow?" He wanted to lie, wanted to promise her everything would be fine, but she deserved truth. "If we lose the legal case, we lose the ranch. Have to move somewhere else, start over." "And me and Tommy? You're mine now. Adoption papers are filed." "Nothing changes that." He pulled her close. "House or no house, ranch or no ranch, you're family. That don't depend on winning tomorrow." She nodded against his chest. "Then it don't matter so much if we lose." But it did matter. It mattered because this land was all Caleb had left of his father, his wife, his lost children. It mattered because starting over at 64 felt like dying. It mattered because Virgil Cossette winning meant evil winning, and he couldn't stomach that, but he couldn't tell Grace any of that, so he just held her and watched the fires burn. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with the old branding iron in his hands, feeling the weight of it, the history carved into the metal. CT Caleb Thornhill. Before that, his father Josiah. Before that, Josiah's father Caleb, for whom he'd been named. 4 generations marked by these 2 letters. What if it ended tomorrow? What if he was the last Thornhill to hold this iron? Grace appeared in the doorway, barefoot in her nightgown. "Can't sleep either?" "Too much thinking." He set down the iron. "Come here, child." She climbed into his lap like Tommy would, small and warm and trusting. "I need to tell you something," Caleb said. "About tomorrow. Whatever happens, I want you to know I'm proud of you. Your papa would be proud. You saved your brother in that blizzard. You caught the forgery in that signature. You're the bravest person I know." "I was just looking." Sometimes that's all bravery is, looking when others turn away, seeing truth when lies are easier. He kissed the top of her head. "You're going to be something special, Grace Thornhill. Win or lose tomorrow, that don't change." She was quiet for a long moment, then, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "If Papa forgave you for the 8 years, for all of it, can you forgive yourself?" The question hit like a bullet. Caleb had spent so long drowning in guilt that forgiveness felt impossible. But sitting there with his granddaughter in his arms, in the house he'd built with his own hands, with the brand of 4 generations on the table before him, maybe forgiveness wasn't about deserving it. Maybe it was about accepting it. "I'm trying, child. I'm trying." That's all Papa would ask. Outside, the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky. April 27th, the day everything would change. Caleb carried Grace back to bed, tucked her in beside Tommy. The baby stirred, made a small sound, settled again. His grandchildren, his family, ends. His reason for fighting. Tomorrow, the whole town would come. Or wouldn't come. Judge Cossett would rule fairly. Or wouldn't. The evidence would be enough, or it wouldn't. But tonight, in this moment, watching Grace and Tommy sleep, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Whatever came tomorrow, he'd already won the thing that mattered most. He had family again. The sun rose clear and cold over Thornhill Ranch. Caleb was up before first light, building the fire in the branding pit. The smell of wood smoke filled the air as flames caught and grew. He arranged 3 branding irons in a line where the coals would be hottest. CT 1891, CT 1907, CT 1932, a timeline in iron. By 7 o'clock, the first wagons appeared on the horizon. By 8, there were 20. By 9, the road was a river of horses and wagons, families and single men, elderly couples and young children. They came from every direction, north, south, east, west, converging on the ranch like water finding its level. Caleb stood on his porch and counted, 50 people, 70, 90. More kept coming. Grace appeared beside him, Tommy on her hip, her eyes were wide. "Grandpa, look at them all." "I see them, child." Eli Drummond rode up, grinning like a young man. "Told you they'd come. Fear's a powerful thing, but so's curiosity. And folks have been curious about Virgil Cossett's business for a long time." Ida Mae Frost arrived in a buggy driven by her nephew. She'd brought the documents in a leather satchel, protected from the morning dew. She set up a table near the cattle pen and spread everything out: the original deed, the death certificate, the notary registry, the filing ledger. All visible, all available for anyone who wanted to examine them. People gathered slowly, cautiously. Some came right up to the table. Others hung back, watching from a distance, but they came. At 9:30, a fine carriage appeared at the edge of the property. Virgil Cossett climbed down, dressed like he was going to church. Beside him was his lawyer, a thin man with nervous eyes. And behind them, stepping down with the careful dignity of office, was Judge Harlan Cossett. The crowd parted to let them through. Virgil's eyes swept the gathering, taking in the numbers, the faces, the table, covered with evidence. His jaw tightened. "Quite a show you're putting on, Thornhill. Just spring branding. You're welcome to watch. I'm here in an official capacity." Judge Cossett agreed to observe, given the irregularities you've alleged. Judge Cossett looked uncomfortable. He was in his 60s, gray-haired, with the soft body of a man who'd spent his life behind a desk. His eyes kept flicking to the crowd, counting votes for next year's election. Caleb climbed onto the fence rail so everyone could see him. The crowd quieted. "Folks, thank you for coming. I know it took courage for some of you to be here. I won't waste your time." His voice carried across the yard, clear and steady. "I asked you here because I got a simple question. Can a dead man sign a paper?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Virgil Cossett claims my stepson Daniel co-signed a lien on this ranch 18 months ago, November 15th, 1931. But Daniel died June 12th, 1932. Miss Ida, would you show folks the death certificate?" Ida held it up. People pressed closer to see. "Death certificate, signed by Doc Harrison, filed June 14th. Caleb's voice hardened. "Now, Virgil's lien claims Daniel signed in November 1931, but it wasn't filed with the county until February 10th, 1933, 6 months after the boy was dead." The murmurs grew louder, angrier. Virgil stepped forward. "The document is notarized, legal. This is theater." "Then explain the notary stamp." Caleb cut him off. "Miss Ida?" Ida held up the registry. "The stamp on this lien shows an expiration date of January 1932, but notary stamps are issued showing their expiration date at the time they're made. This stamp couldn't have existed in November 1931. It wasn't issued until James Henderson renewed his commission in February 1932. She pointed to the tiny numbers on the stamp impression, then to the registry dates. The logic was airtight, mathematical, impossible to argue with. Someone in the crowd shouted, "That's fraud!" Others took up the cry. Virgil's face went red. Judge Cossett held up his hands. This is highly irregular. These matters should be settled in court. Then let's settle it right here, Caleb said, in front of everyone. You want a court? Here's 100 witnesses. The judge looked trapped. His eyes found Virgil's, asking for direction, but Virgil had none to give. Caleb pressed on. There's more. Virgil claims Daniel had inheritance rights, could co-sign the lien. But the original 1891 deed says blood heirs only. Daniel was my stepson, married into the family in 1918. No blood claim. That's circumstantial, Virgil's lawyer said weakly. Subject to interpretation. Then interpret this. Caleb nodded to Eli. Eli opened the far gate. The crowd shifted, craning to see. Through the gate came the biggest bull most of them had ever seen. Old Ironside, 25 years old, gray around the muzzle, scarred from a lifetime of dominance. Ancient and massive and magnificent. The crowd gasped. Everyone in the county knew Old Ironside. He was legend. Eli led the bull to the center of the pen. The animal snorted, stamping once, asserting territory even in his old age. This bull was born in 1908, Caleb said. Branded that same year. Eli, show them. Eli pointed to the bull's hip. There, faded but clear, was the brand. CT. That's the mark my father put on him 25 years ago, Caleb continued. I was there. Eli was there. Half a dozen men watched, and here's the iron that made it. He held up the branding iron, CT 1891, the date stamped into the wooden handle. Daniel was born in 1910, 2 years after this bull was branded. So tell me, Virgil. Caleb's voice rang out across the silent crowd. How could Daniel co-own a bull that was marked with my family's brand before he was even born? The silence was absolute. Even the cattle had gone quiet. Virgil opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came. His lawyer tried. The brand could have been remarked, altered. You calling me a liar? Eli's voice cracked like a whip. I was there in 1908. I helped brand this bull myself. That mark hasn't been touched in 25 years, and I'll swear to it in any court in this territory. Judge Cossett was pale. He looked at the bull, at the iron, at the crowd of witnesses surrounding him. His political calculation was written plain on his face. Rule for Virgil and lose the next election, or rule for truth and keep his seat. Sheriff Pike, who'd been standing at the back of the crowd, stepped forward. Judge, I think we need to talk to Mr. Cossett about these documents. Forgery's a serious crime. This is outrageous, Virgil's composure finally cracked. I have legal rights. That ranch is mine. I've invested... He stopped, realizing what he'd said. Invested? Sheriff Pike's eyebrows rose. Thought you said it was collateral on a legal lien, not an investment. Virgil's lawyer grabbed his arm, hissing something urgent, but Virgil shook him off. I paid for that land. I've been waiting 2 years for that idiot stepson to die, so I could finally claim what's mine. The words poured out in a fury. Do you know how much time I spent getting everything in place? The documents, the signatures, the timeline, and this old fool thinks he can... He stopped. The entire crowd was staring at him. He'd just confessed. To everything. In front of 100 witnesses, a judge, and a sheriff. The silence stretched out like wire pulled too tight. Then Sheriff Pike moved. Virgil Cossett, I'm placing you under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft. You have the right to... You can't do this! Virgil lunged toward Caleb, but 3 men from the crowd stepped between them. Judge Cossett found his voice. Sheriff, proceed with the arrest. And someone fetch the county recorder. I want every case Mr. Cossett's been involved in reviewed immediately. As Pike led Virgil away in handcuffs, Virgil twisted back to scream at Caleb. This isn't over. I'll appeal. Keep walking, Pike said. The crowd erupted. Not in cheers exactly, but in something deeper. Relief, vindication, the sound of people who'd been holding their breath for too long, finally exhaling. Caleb climbed down from the fence. His legs were shaking. Grace ran to him, and he picked her up, held her tight. Ida May appeared, tears streaming down her face. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Caleb corrected. People pressed forward, shaking his hand, clapping his back, apologizing for not coming forward sooner. Ben Yoder was crying openly. I should have stood with you from the start. I'm sorry, Caleb. I'm so sorry. You're here now. That's what matters. The sun was high overhead now, warming the earth, burning off the last of winter's chill. In the pen, Old Ironside stood calm and proud, having delivered the testimony that iron could give, permanent, unchangeable, true. Grace tugged on Caleb's sleeve. Can we brand the new calves now, like we planned? Yes, child. Let's do it right. They spent the next hour branding the spring calves while the crowd watched. It was ritual, tradition, the marking of what belonged and always would belong to this land and this family. When the last calf was marked and released, and the irons were cooling in the grass, the first drops of rain began to fall. Not hard, just gentle, steady, the kind of rain that soaks deep and brings things to life. People tilted their faces up, laughing. The drought was finally breaking. After 3 months of dry cold, spring rain had come. Grace and Tommy stood in it, holding hands, letting the water wash over them. Caleb watched from the porch, feeling something tight in his chest finally loosen. The frozen gate he'd kicked open that first night, the one that had groaned with rust and refused to move, swung freely now on its hinges. The rain had washed the rust away, oiled the mechanism with water. Everything was opening, everything was thawing, they were home. The rain fell steady through the afternoon. People didn't leave right away. They stood in it, letting the water soak their clothes and hair, laughing like children. Some started dancing, old couples holding each other close, children splashing in the puddles that formed in the wheel ruts. Sheriff Pike had loaded Virgil into his wagon and driven off toward town, but before he left, he'd shaken Caleb's hand. There's going to be an investigation, he said. Probably find a dozen other cases like yours, maybe more. You just opened up something that's been festering for years. Judge Cossett approached next, hat in his hands, looking like a man who'd just avoided drowning. Mr. Thornhill, I owe you an apology. I should have investigated this matter more thoroughly from the beginning. You should have. Caleb didn't soften it. I'll be filing the lien nullification order tonight. The ranch is yours, free and clear, and I'll be recusing myself from any cases involving the Cossett family going forward. Bit late for that, Your Honor. The judge flinched. I know, but it's what I can do now. He paused. For what it's worth, that was the bravest thing I've seen in 30 years on the bench, standing up when everyone else was sitting down. After he left, neighbors started approaching, apologizing, explaining, making excuses that Caleb didn't need to hear but let them say anyway because they needed to say them. Ben Yoder brought his whole family over. Caleb, I'm sorry, I should have... You're here now, Ben. That counts for something. If you need help rebuilding, fixing anything Virgil damaged, I'll take you up on that. More offers came. Tools, labor, seed for planting, a milk cow someone's herd could spare. The community that had fractured under Virgil's pressure was knitting itself back together, finding its courage again in small increments. Ida May stayed late, helping clean up, packing her documents carefully back into their leather satchel. You know there's going to be more work, she said. Other families Virgil defrauded. They'll need help proving their cases. Then we'll help them. Even though it'll cost you time, money you don't have. Caleb looked at Grace, playing in the rain with Tommy. I got more than money now. Got something worth fighting for. Might as well fight for folks who need it. Ida smiled. I'll start pulling the records tomorrow. Build a list of everyone who lost property in the last 3 years. Won't be easy. Virgil was careful. But we'll find them. After she left, Eli helped Caleb move Old Ironside back to his pasture. The old bull walked slow but steady, his work done. Thank you, friend, Caleb said, patting the bull's massive shoulder. You earned your retirement twice over today. That bull's got more integrity than half the men in this county, Eli said. Speaking of which, what are you going to do about the surveyor? The boundary dispute? Judge said he'd review that too. Turns out the surveyor was Virgil's cousin. Whole thing was rigged from the start. Eli shook his head. Evil's got a long reach when you let it grow unchecked. Good thing you didn't let it. That evening, after everyone had gone and the ranch was quiet except for the rain, Doc Harrison arrived with papers in his medical bag. Heard about today. Whole town's talking about nothing else. He pulled out a folder. Brought these. Adoption papers. Judge Cossett fast-tracked them this afternoon. Said it was the least he could do. The papers were official, stamped, signed, legal proof of what Caleb's heart had known for months. He spread them on the kitchen table. Grace was putting Tommy to bed, singing the same lullaby she'd sung that first night when Caleb found them. Grace, he called. Come here, child. Got something to show you. She appeared, wiping her hands on her dress, saw the papers and went still. What are those? Adoption decree. His voice was rough with emotion. Makes it official. You and Tommy are mine. Forever. Nobody can change it. She climbed into his lap, too big for it really, but he made room anyway, and read slowly. Grace Thornhill. Samuel James Thornhill, She looked up, tears in her eyes. We got your name now? You always had it, child, just made it legal. Does this mean nobody can take us away? Nobody. Ever. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight. Doc Harrison quietly let himself out, leaving them to their moment. Later, Grace asked, Can we go see Papa tomorrow? Tell him about today? First thing in the morning. Will he know that we're okay now? I think he knows, child. I think somehow he knows. They visited the grave at sunrise. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving everything clean and fresh. The wildflowers Grace had planted weeks ago were blooming now, purple and yellow and white, making a small garden around her father's marker. She added new flowers to the collection, then knelt in the wet grass. Papa, we won. Grandpa proved Mr. Cossett was lying. And now we're really truly Grandpa's children, Grace Thornhill and Samuel James Thornhill. She smiled through her tears. We got your middle name, Papa, for Tommy, so you're still part of us. Caleb knelt beside her. Daniel, your children are safe. Your name lives on, and I promise you, I'll tell them every good story I can remember. The time you caught that 8-pound trout, the way you could fix any engine just by listening to it, how you stood up to that bully when you were 12 even though he was twice your size. He paused, remembering. You were a good man, better than I deserved as a son, but I'm trying to be better. Trying to be the grandfather you'd want for these children. Grace leaned against him. He'd be proud, Grandpa. I know he would. They sat there for a long time, the three of them, Caleb, Grace, and the memory of Daniel, as the sun climbed higher and warmed the earth. When they finally left, Grace looked back once. Bye, Papa. We'll come back soon. That afternoon, Caleb taught Grace how to use the branding iron properly. Not on cattle, just practicing on scrap wood, teaching her the right angle, the right pressure, the right timing. Why am I learning this, she asked. Because someday this ranch will be yours, you and Tommy. You'll need to know how to mark what's yours, how to prove what belongs to you. She practiced for an hour, marking piece after piece of wood, until the CT brand was burned clear and deep every time. Like this. Just like that, child. Perfect. Tommy toddled over, attracted by the smoke and sizzle. He tried to grab the iron, and Caleb caught his hand just in time. Not yet, boy. Few more years for you. But the picture was clear in Caleb's mind. Tommy at 10, at 15, at 20, holding this same iron, marking cattle with the same brand that had marked them for 4 generations. The line would continue, the name would continue, the ranch would continue. Not because of blood, though there was that too, but because of choice. Because one freezing night in February, a little girl had walked through a blizzard and an old man had opened his frozen gate, and everything had changed. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Caleb stood on his porch watching Grace's garden. The seeds she'd planted weeks ago were starting to sprout, tiny green shoots pushing through the dark earth, life coming from ground that had seemed barren. The gate swung freely on its hinges now, the rust washed away by rain. The fence posts stood straight and strong, each one bearing the CT brand burned deep into the wood. Inside, Grace was reading to Tommy from a picture book someone had given them at the branding ceremony. Her voice carried through the open window, soft, patient, loving. His family, his home, his proof that broken things could be mended if you had the courage to try. The brand on the gate caught the last light of the sun, glowing like it was heated fresh from the fire. CT 1891, still here, still true, still standing. 3 springs have passed since Grace walked through that blizzard carrying her baby brother. She's 11 now, tall and lean, one eye still clouded but her vision clear in the ways that matter. She runs the garden like a general, rows of vegetables straight as fence posts, flowers blooming in careful patterns around the edges. Tommy's 3 years old, talking nonstop, got his daddy's smile and his grandmother's stubborn streak. Folks ask me sometimes, was it worth it? Fighting Virgil, risking everything, burning bridges with half the county. And I tell them, wrong question. Right question is, what are you willing to lose to keep what matters? I lost 8 years with my son, lost pride, lost the easy path, but I gained Grace, gained Tommy, gained proof that iron don't lie when paper does. And that broken hearts, they ain't useless. They just got more room. Virgil Cossett's serving 12 years for fraud. Turned out he'd forged liens on 14 families. Most got their land back, thanks to Ida Mae's record-keeping and folks finally finding their courage. Judge Cossett resigned, died 2 years later. Ida's the county clerk now. First woman to hold the post. Eli lived to see Grace's garden bloom 3 times. Passed last January in his sleep. Good man, that one. My ranch sits on the same dirt it always has. But it's different now. Warmer, fuller. Every spring when we brand the calves, Grace holds the iron steady and I guide her hand. She'll run this place someday. Already does, near about. And when folks ask whose land this is, she points to the gate. CT 1891, still hanging there, rust and all. Paper can lie, memories fade, but iron don't forget, neither does family, the kind you'd walk through a blizzard for.